So guys, it's finally happening. After months and months of leaks, whispers, and its coming soon reports, it now looks like Apple is lining up the next generation Apple TV for a late 2026 release. And honestly, it's about time, because the Apple TV is one of those products that quietly becomes essential once it's part of your setup. It's the box that powers movie nights, sports weekends, YouTube deep dives, Apple Arcade sessions, and everything in between. But the current model has been coasting for a while now. And if Apple wants Apple TV to stay the best streaming box on the market, it needs a real hardware refresh, not just another minor tweak. Over the last 9 months, we've repeatedly heard the same story. The next Apple TV hardware has basically been ready, and Apple has been waiting for the right moment to announce it. That's why the predicted launch window kept shifting, first spring, then WWDC, then later in the year, and now we're looking at the end of 2026, and one of the most consistent sources backing that up is Mark Gurman, who's echoed the same general idea. A new Apple TV is on the way, and Apple's timing is the main variable, not whether the product exists. Now let's talk about why this upgrade matters. The current Apple TV still runs the A15 chip, the same chip from the regular iPhone 13 back in 2021. And in 2026, that's a problem. Not because the A15 is slow for streaming. Streaming is easy, but because Apple isn't building the future of tvOS around basic streaming anymore. They're building it around Apple Intelligence, Siri AI, and device processing. If Apple wants the Apple TV to be a real part of the Apple Intelligence ecosystems, smart Siri, better voice control, and device understanding, smarter search, improved recommendation, and deeper integration with iPhone, HomePod, and HomeKit, then the Apple TV needs newer silicon and more memory. And that brings us to the biggest expected upgrade. The next Apple TV is rumored to use the A17 Pro chip, paired with 8 GB of RAM. That combination is a big deal. The A17 Pro doesn't just bring more CPU and GPU, brings a more modern platform for Apple's device AI features, better efficiency, and a lot more headroom for what tvOS becomes over the next few years. And 8 GB of RAM is the kind of spec that signals Apple is serious about doing more on the device, not just pushing everything to the cloud down. Performance is only part of the story. The big question is, what features could Apple add this time? First up, HDMI passthrough. I've seen so many of you ask about this, and I'm right there with you. HDMI passthrough is one of those features that feels long overdue, especially for users with soundbars, AV receivers, capture setups, or more advanced home theater rigs. Apple has skipped it before, but if Apple truly wants the Apple TV to be the premium center of the living room, HDMI passthrough would be a massive quality of life upgrade. So yes, Apple is finally going all-in on making Apple TV the best streaming box. This is one feature I really expect to show up. Next, connectivity upgrades. We're likely looking at improved Bluetooth performance and better Wi-Fi potentially with Apple's newer wireless tech, which could deliver more stable streaming, lower latency for controllers and AirPods, and just fewer weird connection issues overall. And if you use your Apple TV for Apple Arcade, this matters a lot more than people realize now. What about design? I wouldn't expect Apple to reinvent the look. Apple TV's current compact puck design works. It's easy to hide, easy to mount, and it doesn't clutter your setup. But I do think Apple could modernize the materials. A more premium finish, more recyclable enclosure choices, maybe even aluminum anything. That makes it feel less like a plastic box from a few product cycles ago. Let's talk storage. The base storage is often enough for streaming, but as apps get heavier, games get larger, and Apple leans harder into Apple Arcade and AI-driven features. Storage becomes more important. That said, I still expect Apple to keep the base model around 64 GB, maybe 128 GB, if we're lucky. But with NAND pricing and Apple's typical product segmentation, I wouldn't guarantee a jump unless Apple has a software reason that forces it. As for the lineup, I expect Apple to keep the same two-model strategy, a W-Wi-Fi model and a W-Wi-Fi plus Ethernet model with Gigabit Ethernet NAND. Yes, HDMI 2.1 support should remain part of the package. along with all the usual Apple TV staples like Dolby Vision and Dolby Atmos support. Now the big question: when is it launching? At this point, the most logical and most likely window is September 2026 at Apple's annual iPhone event. That timing makes perfect sense. Apple can roll out iOS 27, macOS 27, and tvOS 27 around the same season, and it gives them the perfect stage to show off Apple Intelligence features across devices, including the Apple TV Dot. And if the Apple TV is getting A17 Pro plus 8 GB of RAM specifically to support Siri AI and Apple Intelligence, then Apple will want to demo those features on stage, alongside the iPhone and everything else in the ecosystem. So, if I had to pin it down, I'd say mid to late September 2026 is the window to watch. Now, let's get into pricing. Apple has already adjusted pricing across a lot of products recently, and I don't think Apple wants more backlash by pushing the Apple TV even higher unless they absolutely have to. The A17 Pro won't be cheap, but it will be cheaper to manufacture than it was at launch. And the biggest cost drivers are really RAM and storage. So, unless Apple bumps storage significantly or adds expensive new hardware components, I expect pricing to stay roughly in the same range as the current models. So that's where things stand. Right now, a late 2026 Apple TV launch, likely powered by the A17 Pro with 8 GB of RAM, designed to bring Apple Intelligence and next Siri features to the living room, plus hopefully upgrades like HDMI passthrough and better wireless performance. Now, I want to hear from you. Are you actually excited for a new Apple TV in 2026, or do you think Apple has waited too long? And if Apple adds Apple Intelligence features and HDMI passthrough, would that be enough to make you upgrade? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and if you want the latest Apple leaks, Apple TV news, iPhone Arling Arlu, updates, and everything happening with Apple Intelligence and Siri AI, make sure you're subscribed. And turn on notifications, because the moment we get more credible leaks on the Apple TV, we're covering it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.